PS4 tutorial, so the revert mod has become more relevant than ever. Just recently because of a new development. Firstly, of course, the revert mod. If you don't know what this is, basically, it's possible to actually revert back to the previously installed firmware. So whatever firmware you were on before you updated, you can revert back to that firmware in most cases. Now, this is relevant for two reasons. First of all, anybody on 12.50, for the most part, should be able to revert their console to a jailbreakable firmware 12.02 or lower, which is great. The other big deal is that it's recently been discovered, or made public anyway, that it's also now possible to get those free Lua game demos that can be used to run the jailbreak. You can download them on the latest firmware, and then when you revert back to a jailbreakable firmware, you'll be able to use those Lua demos to run the jailbreak without having to buy one of those physical copies of the game imported from Japan. So that is why the revert method has just become a lot more exciting. So I've done a full tutorial on how to set up the revert mod. It's not a trivial process. A lot of people send their consoles off to mod or repair shops to get this done. In my case, I did a whole tutorial showing how I set up my revert mod as like a permanent hardware mod on the console. And that's the console I'm gonna be using here to demonstrate this process. But obviously, I'm not going to show how to wire everything up again in this video, because I already have a full tutorial that shows that, which will be left down in the video description. So if you're already on firmware 12.50 and you managed to get the Lua game demos when that was the latest firmware, then you can basically use this to revert back to a jailbreakable firmware, your previously installed version, so that you'll be able to use those games to run when you're back on the older firmware. That is the idea if you're already on a jailbreakable firmware. In my case, I'm on 12.0. Let's say I don't have one of the Lua games that I can use to run the jailbreak, but I do have the revert mod set up. Then what I can do is I can update to 12.52 or whatever the latest firmware is, download the Lua demos for free, and then revert back to the previously installed firmware that was jailbreakable, so that I can use them to run the jailbreak when I'm back on 12.0. So that's what I'm gonna be doing here in this video. Now, ideally, if you're gonna do it, you should really back up your Syscon and your NOR flash while you're on the older before firmware. You update, but for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and update straight to 12.52 and then revert once I have the Lua game demos. So now we're updated to the latest firmware, currently 12.52. So we can go ahead and access the PS now to download the free Lua game demos. And I've also gone ahead and signed into my Japanese account, which can be used to get the Lua game demos. If you don't know how to create a Japanese account on your console to get the free demos, then again, I have a video on that, which I will leave linked below in the description. So essentially what we want to do here is first of all, download the Lua demos on 12.50. So what we'll do here, we'll go to search on the PlayStation Store, and we'll go ahead and start downloading the demos. So we want Himadashi Creative Demo. So we'll go ahead and grab this and download it to our PS4 here. So the other games you can get are Fuyuki's IX, Cheadle, and Jinky Resurrection. The demo versions, any one of those can be used to load the jailbreak, but you only need one of them to be able to load it. We'll go ahead and just install all of them here just now. So there we go, so you can run each one of the demos. Just make sure they're all working, at which point we should be all good. So if we head over to our settings, we want to go to account management and make sure we activate as your primary PS4 for the account. So for the Japanese account that you're using to actually download the games, you want to make sure it's activated as your primary PS4. As you can see here, it says this PS4 is activated as your primary. If yours isn't, then make sure you select the option to activate here at the top. And make sure it is activated as your primary console for the account. Okay, so once that's done, we can go ahead and turn our console off. We just need to revert it back to the previously installed firmware. Okay, so I've got my reversible PS4 So to get it ready for the revert process, I've just got the switch on the top, which I just need to flick to on. So I switch all three of these little switches to on here. And then if I remove the kind of cover plate, you will actually be able to see the chip itself, which is just a TNC 2.0 plus with a few modifications to it here that allow it to read and write to the NOR chip. So all I have to do is plug in a USB cable into that TNC. Obviously, the computer and the TNC itself on the PS4. And we should be ready to read and write to it again. I have a full tutorial on how to set up this mod from scratch, which again will be left in the video description if you want to see how to kind of create your own essentially mod chip for the PS4 to revert it. Okay. So the tools I'm using for this are the Syscon writer from Ukraine, and Q and the PS4 tools from AndyManDev, which are both free pieces of software to do this. And I also need the TNC.x, which is the programmer to program the TNC, so I can read and write to the Syscon and the NOR
So I'm gonna
open that up first,
and then
open up the Syscon writer. Go to the hardware TNC to point 0++,
Take the hex
file and drag it into the program, and then press the button on the TNC to enter program mode. And then click the program button. And then once it's programmed, we can hit reboot, and now it's ready to read and write to the Syscon. So I can now go to the PC and open up the PS4 Syscon application. From here, I can go to dump the full Syscon flash and click the 3 dots to browse. And the location I'm using for this is just gonna be the PS4 folder, and we're gonna call the file Syscon and press enter. We're gonna take to Syscon dumps to make sure that they are the same, so that we have good dumps of the Syscon. So we want to take to dumps, and then it will compare them to make sure they are identical. Okay, so files are identical, process done successfully. So we have good dumps of our Syscon. So that's the first step done. So next we're gonna go back onto our TNC flasher. I'll go into the PS4 tools this time and go to assets, hardware SPIWay. And then I'll take the hex file for the TNC, for the NOR flasher, and put that on and press the button to enter programmer mode, program the TNC reboot. And now we are ready to write to the NOR flash, or read from the NOR flash first. So now we're gonna run the run.bat to open up the PS4 tools. If it's the first time using this application, you'll need to use Python, so make sure you install Python. And then there's 2 modules to install using the pip installer. So you can use pip install pyserial and pycryptodome, I believe. So those are the 2 modules that are needed to get this working. So once you have this application loaded, we're going to use option 3, which is to flash using SPIWay. So we're going to select that, and then select option 1 for comport. And we can see it identifies the NOR chip. So it looks like everything is good. And we'll use option 1 to read all to read our NOR flash. And then we just wait for this to complete. Okay. There we go, so the dump is complete. We're gonna do it a second time again. It's the same thing as the Syscon. Take 2 dumps and then compare them to make sure they are identical. Okay, so now that we have to dump, we can use option S to select the file. And we can see them showing up here as no. I'll use option C to compare the files in the current folder. And we can see that these 2 dumps here for the NOR flash have the same hash, which means they are identical. So we have good dumps of our NOR flash as well. So now we can basically select no 7, which is one of the dumps of our NOR flash. And you can see it loads up the information about the console, showing the board ID as 1216B. It's important to note that down. We can also see our active firmware is showing as firmware 12.52, which is also good now. UART is currently on. So if it's off for you, use option 1 and then 1 again to turn UART on. Obviously, it's already on. So I'll just do it again to make sure that is on, and then 0 to go back. And now we're gonna use option 4 to switch core OS for firmware revert, so we'll select option 4. And then these are the different slot switch patterns. So obviously I'm on a 1-to-1 6B console that we identified before. So for me, it's gonna be one of these 2. I think the last time I reverted, I used so this time it will be option 4 to switch back. So I'm gonna use option 4 here. It says save as a separate file, Y for yes. Flash this to the IC, we'll say yes to flash it to the NOR flash. And then 1 to select our USB serial device. And then option 3 for PS4 core OS switch. We'll press enter, and that will write that section to the NOR flash. And you can see that is now done. So that's everything we need to do to the NOR to switch it over. So now we can go option 1 to the file browser. And now we'll select our Syscon, which is option 10. And then we'll use option 2, which is for the auto SNVS patch. And then we want to select method, which is option 1, which is the last for records will be deleted. Now, some of these other options can actually override the licenses on the Cisco, which is why you don't want to use, for the most part, option A should be fine, option B might work. I'm not sure, but option is the one that definitely works. So I'm gonna use option A. So no, 1 and press enter, and that creates our Cisco patch. So now we should be good. We can go ahead and simply quit out of the PS4 We don't need to use this anymore. We've got everything done. And now we just need to basically flash the Syscon patch back over, which again we can do by opening up the Syscon writer. Just first of all getting the hex file copied back over to my TNC. And we'll go ahead and program that so that we can use the Syscon writer. And you can actually use the PS4 tools to write to the Syscon as well. But I'm just used to using the official application here. So that's what I'm gonna use. And then we're gonna use the Syscon process of writing the Syscons. NVS and SNVs, only select that option. And then browse for the Syscon patch that you created. In the Wii tools, we're gonna open that up. Verify after write and then start. And that's going to write that section to the Syscon and bam. We can see it is now done. So at this point, we can go ahead and unplug the USB and flick the switch on top of my console to off. To disconnect the T and C. So now we can plug the console back in and try and if it boots us straight back into the home menu like nothing happened. Then obviously you used the wrong slot switch option for the NOR flash. So you have to use I used option 4. So maybe I'd have to use option 3 instead if that happened otherwise. If it's done correctly, it should boot you into safe mode. One other thing that's needed when reverting is a recovery firmware. For the firmware that you're reverting to. So I'm reverting back to 12.02. So I need to download a recovery firmware for 12.02. So I'm using this website here. There's a few different sites you can use to download older firmware versions. For the PS4, I'll leave them in the description. But basically, we need to download a recovery firmware, not a retail firmware here. So I'm gonna go to the recovery firmwares list for 12.02, which is the firmware I'm reverting to. And I'm gonna go ahead and download that right here. So once I have it downloaded, I need to put that on a USB drive that's formatted in SFAT format. We go to the root of the USB drive, right-click, and create a new folder called PS4 in uppercase characters. Inside that folder, we create another folder called update, also in uppercase characters. And then we copy the update file into that folder. So we'll just copy it in, and then once that's copied, we need to make sure it's renamed correctly to PS4. Update.pup in uppercase characters. And make sure you go to View, Show, and Show File Name Extensions, so that you can ensure the file name is correct. PS4 update.pup, and then you should be all good to go. So at that point, we can unplug our drive and plug it into our PS4. Okay, so when we boot up the PS4 after slot switching, you can see it just takes us straight to safe mode. It says to connect the DualShock 4 via the USB charge cable. So we plug in the charge cable for the controller into the console, and then press the PS button. And now it's saying connect a USB storage device. Update file for reinstallation of version 12.0. 2 or later, so my previously installed firmware is 12.02. So that's what it wants me to reinstall. I put the 12.0 to recovery firmware on the USB and connected it to my PS4. So I'll just select OK. And it should then reinstall from that update file. And it should start installing the 12.0 to recovery firmware. We should get our system back on 12.0 to OK. So finally loading back into the console now that we're on 12.02. So if we head back to our settings, we can see we're now on 12.0 to firmware back where we were. And we do, in fact, have the Lua game demos that are still accessible now. So we can basically just run the game now in my case. I already have a save file that I put on a USB drive for the Hamader. She creative demo to load the jailbreak. So we'll go ahead and I'll just quickly get that save on there for my USB. So save data on USB storage, copy to system storage. And this is the one right here for the demo version. So I'll go ahead and copy that over and we should be good. Obviously, if you want to know how to create the save file, I have full jailbreak tutorials on how to set up the jailbreak that you can check out. I'll leave it down in the description or at the end of the video. But anyway, so let's go ahead and see. These other demos should run just fine. If we try this one, you can see it should load. Yep, there you go. So the demo is in fact working. But I put the modified save file to load the jailbreak on this one. Let's go ahead and load it. And we should get the auto Lua loader to jailbreak the console without having to have a physical copy of the game. So here we go, payload is already up to date, and there it is. Golden is now running, so we've successfully jailbroke our console. So I took a console that was on 12.02, let's say I did not have a physical copy of the game. I can update to 12.52. Download the demos on PSN. Then revert while retaining the licenses so that I can then use these demos, these free demos, to then run the jailbreak on the older firmware that I reverted to. So that is the general idea of how this works. Now, obviously, this is not going to be for everybody. Reverting is not a trivial process. The only reason it's trivial is because I set up this kind of hardware mod to make it easy to revert on the fly, which again, I have a full tutorial of which will be linked in the description. If you do want to, try and do something like this. But generally, from most people if you want this done. I suspect there will probably be services available on and repair shops to do this for you. To get the Lua DMOS on there and revert your console. And if you're on 12.50 and you already managed to get these Lua DMOS back when 12.50 was the latest then firmware, you can just revert back to your previously installed and firmware. Be able to use them anyway. Hope you guys enjoyed this one or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Once again, I'll hopefully